Downs' sculpture springs from an idea, from an inspiration, from something deep inside. And over the months, a work of art gradually emerges as the sculptor, guided intuitively by an evolving vision, shapes and carves the wax into its final form. But it is far from finished. This is only the end of the beginning.
Hello, I'm Doug Downs, and today we're going to be making start to make a mold on the wax that I've been working on for the last month and a half. This is approximately the piece. Hopefully you can tell this is a stylized barn owl that's landed on a wagon wheel. You can see little extra bits of wax that I've melted on both to the legs and on this section on the owl. These are going to be the entrance for the wax once I've made the mold. First of all, I'll be making a clay wall all around the sculpture. We make a mold basically so that I can make more than one sculpture. Now, if I wanted to make only one, I could simply take this to the foundry, have them cast it, and I wouldn't have to bother to make a mold. I'm beginning to smooth down the wall. So I'll make this completely smooth around the entire piece. The clay will act as a separator when we apply the rubber on top, and then the cardboard will go along and supply the walls to keep the rubber from simply running over the side of the cliff. I have now enclosed the clay walls all around the different parts of the sculpture. We're doing the first half of the mold today in terms of adding 4 different layers of the silicone rubber. Since you've been gone, I've completed the 4 layers of rubber on the molds, on all the molds. And next what's going to happen, I'm going to mix up plaster and pour it on top of the rubber. I'm using plaster of Paris as a backup to the rubber because the rubber is very flexible and will move. So in order to brace it, we're using the plaster of Paris. Once the plaster is dry, which as noted is a backup for the flexible rubber. So now I'm going to remove the clay. We'll start with a mold that was basically on the legs of the barn owl. So there it is with the clay removed. You can now see we have a rubber wall now instead of clay around the legs. We are on the back of the mold. Let's see how we're doing here. This is the mold on the legs of the barn owl. I've already taken it apart. So here's one of the backup shells, the other backup shell. Here's the flexible rubber on the inside, and then we take it apart, and there we have the flexible rubber mold. Okay, let's take this apart. Okay. But here it is emerging from the rubber. So now we have both halves of the mold separated. So that's why we need this backup shell. So we can put it back in there and make it firm. This will be strapped back together again this way, and then hot wax will be poured in from the top. Now you can see I'm going to pour it right in the top of the mold. Neatness does not count. So it comes right off. Here again is the mold underneath. And I'm going to just separate out of the bottom. Ah, this is interesting. Ah, voila, success. And there we have it. Okay, we're going to be getting rid of the seams that were created when the wax was poured into the mold. So I'll be probably spending about an hour and a half to 2 hours to go over the entire wax and resculpting it so the forms will be what they would be on the original. At some point, before I take it to the foundry, I'm going to add on the wax legs to the body of the bird. I'm going to melt it all the way back, both sides, so it's actually melted and fused together in the wax. And now I'll just have to keep going on this. That's the finer points of wax cleaning.
At the Monterey Sculpture Center, master founder John Fleury attaches a wax cup to the sculpture's base. He also runs wax tubes from the cup to various parts of the sculpture. Later, when molten bronze is poured into the cup, these tubes will ensure that the bronze flows evenly to all parts of the piece. John then builds a ceramic shell around the sculpture and its newly attached cup and tubes by dipping it into a material that resembles wet plaster, then coating it with fine sand. Over the next few days, he'll repeat this process several times to build up the shell's thickness and strength. Before pouring molten bronze into the cup, however, the original wax sculpture inside the shell, regardless of its beauty and the skill that created it, must be removed. This occurs when the shell is loaded into a blast furnace and heated to 1400 degrees. Soon the melted wax flows out through the shell and into the collection pans located beneath the furnace. Hence this procedure's name, the lost wax process. Empty now of wax, the shell joins others in a kiln set at 1500 degrees. Hardened and strengthened in the kiln, the shell is ready to receive the molten bronze. 2100-degree bronze is poured from the crucible into the empty shells. Once the bronze cools, a craftsman shatters the shell, carefully chipping it away to reveal the bronze sculpture attached to its now bronze cup and tubes. These will be cut off before Doug takes the casting home. After weathering the rigors of casting, the bronze needs considerable restoration and refinement. Back in his workshop, Doug spends many long hours re-sculpting the areas where the tubes were attached and correcting any imperfections that occurred during the casting process. For this purpose, he uses electric drills, various size grinders, and a TIG welder where necessary.
Now I'm going to sandblast it with a very fine grade of sand. This will clean the metal without harming the metal, without pitting it. So I'll have a better view of the welds I just made. Here we are with the bronze inside of the sandblasting cabinet. This is the sandblasting gun. All right, just a quick summary of the tools I use and what they're going to do. When I get it back, it looks like this. After I grind it with the big grinder, then I've smoothed it back to its original form. I cut out any gates or small parts with my disc tool. And then I further refine it, starting with the bigger grinder tip, carbide grinder tip. Once I've got it to a certain degree, then I take it to the smaller grinders, and therefore I'm able to further refine it. This will take many hours to do this, to actually recarve some of the areas in bronze. Any welding necessary will have to occur, and I will eventually weld the piece on to the rest of it, and then using these tools recarve the actual bronze.
The bronze revisits the sandblaster for its final cleansing with very fine sand. It's now ready for a return trip to the foundry, this time for the addition of color. At the foundry, Doug discusses the sculpture's final look with master patina artist Derek Bala. The patina process relies on the artificial chemical oxidation of bronze to give it color. It is not paint, but rather involves a light acid bath that, when heated, bonds with the metal to change its color permanently. Using a propane torch in tandem with various chemicals, Derek weaves his way around the sculpture, spraying and heating the entire piece until it's completely one color, in this case white. To add more layers of color, he switches bottles and continues the process.
But you wanted to have soap Derek on there. Right, a little modeling.
Once he has realized Doug's vision and specifications, Derek coats the sculpture with paste wax. This prevents the patina from changing. It also provides luster. All that remains now is for Doug to mount the sculpture on a walnut base.
All right.
This is only one sculpture of a 12-piece edition. Yet this is no assembly line. Each of the 12 emerges from the same lengthy process. Each shares the same extensive care and intensive attention to detail. This makes each bronze, while seemingly identical to the others, a uniquely individual work of art. That is both the beauty and the burden of the lost wax process.